here we go. One trip more into the book. I really want to apologize for not being able to continue in the classroom as we look at Heidegger. Part of me, back when I was putting the class together, said, "Oh, Heidegger, they don't need to read Heidegger. I like them too well for that, and I don't even know him yet." But I was thinking, it'd be fun for me. They'll get a little something out of it. There's no way I can spend the energy over this thing to teach you Heidegger. Not even going to try. But I'll give you the basics so that you have some idea of why he's here. All right, let's run over a little bit of what's come along to this point. What we've talked about in each case, for lack of a better way of putting it, is reaching a perfect person, the idealized person, the person we should all strive to be. So we have here in our author's version, anyway, of philosophical anthropology, this ideal, the study of what it is to be the ideal person. Heidegger comes from a tradition called phenomenology, which believes that you discover the truth by pulling away everything that's not essential. And that which is most essential about being human, for Heidegger, he calls Dasein, which is German for like the being, being in itself, pure being. I mean, that's what you're looking at, Dasein. What's in Dasein is that which is most truly us, that which is essential to us. If you hear tell about people being tortured or an accident or other bad things happening to them, and they say, but I just pulled into just the basic, the core, the most inner me, and I've acted like it wasn't happening to me. It was happening to somebody else. The real me, they couldn't touch the real me. They couldn't get to the real me. The real me is beyond all that. And that Heidegger would have agreed with. The real me, the essential me, the true me is underneath all this, at the bottom of all the little accidental things. The question, of course, is, we want to ask Heidegger is, well, what's there? Obviously my height, my weight, my age, and my sex aren't there because all those are accidents. All those come and go. We live in times where people have these things. We have properties, but the properties, clearly, I used to be shorter. I used to be skinnier. I used to have less gray in my hair. All of these things are not therefore essential to me because they're not always been a part of me. And what Dasein is supposed to be is that which was always been a part of me. See, so we wind up Heidegger, not clear what all Heidegger is talking about, which is part of the reason why Heidegger is so vague in how he talks. Really and truly. I was complaining to my wife the other day that nobody should ask you to read this stuff as a beginning class. But it is true, to be fair, the very first class I was in was one where I read Heidegger. It was called Phenomenology and Existentialism. And it was one of my first semester classes as an undergraduate. Well, we were on a quarter system, but one of my first quarter classes as an undergraduate. But I was in a strange place in a strange land. And we must never compare ourselves to me. So anyway, passing on. Let's just lay out the basic of what Heidegger's trying to get at. Now, mind you, this is being written My recollection is in about 1920. Let me double check that here in the textbook. And I say that because some of the insights. Yeah, this is a translation in 1962. Well, anyway, I say that, make that point about it being written in 1920, and it is written in 1920 because it's written before World War II. One of the famous things about Heidegger in philosophical circles is that Heidegger was a Nazi. Well, he wasn't really so much a Nazi. I mean, he did join the party, no point pretending, and he did run one of the major universities. I want to say Heidelberg, but it might have been Bonn or Berlin. But a major university. Excuse me. I'm fresh out of bed this morning. For the Nazis. And so this was written before he was that person. I know that. So I want to say around 1920. And as I say it because the psychological insight in it has much become a commonplace to all of us, things that we just take for granted. Heidegger's not going to spell it out in so many terms here because he's busy being esoteric and obtuse. But he's talking about how the best self is the authentic self. And the authentic self is when the self that we are inside, that nobody else can see or touch, matches our outside self that we create. So that we create a version of ourselves that matches our innermost selves. Such a person who does that is authentic. What Heidegger condemns is the inauthentic person. Now, we saw some of this back in Simone de Beauvoir. But Heidegger spells out the details of it. Okay, Heidegger sees at least 4 selves in this segment, and once I've spelled those out and talked about the importance, we'll move on. Now, the innermost self is the true self, and the true self is who we really, really are. If we can project that true self into the world so that people see us for who we are, and we are who we are, then we're being authentic. It's when we project something other than who we are, we're being inauthentic. And the inauthentic person is a person not to be modeled. You do not want to be inauthentic. Now, you've got a problem, because you're not in control of all of who you are. Some of who you are is controlled by the outside. Thus, we have our true self, the Dasein. We have this next self in the world. And this self for itself. And that's the self we want to project authentically. Then there is the self of the world, by the world, where we are, how we are fit into our social structure and our social status. And again, the best person matches those two together as best they can. Now, you're not in control of all of that because they're the outside, but you try to find that spot in society which is truest to you, so that you're able to carry this innermost self right straight through who you really are, who you project, who the world sees you as, and who the world wants you to be, that last layer out there, which is almost divorced from you entirely, where you're you purely as perceived, beyond your control. Now that one you can't really be held responsible for, not being inauthentic. But it nevertheless is something you want to try all the way through. So that the good person, the authentic person, we don't say the good person. We're not worried about good and evil here. We're worried simply about what is the best possible person to be. The best possible person is a person who begins at their innermost self, projects that self to the world, tries to play that self to the world, who finds a way to fit that self into the social roles the world wants, and if is lucky, is perceived as that person throughout the world. Okay. all I expect you to get out of Heidegger, all that other stuff. I'd have explained it. Maybe. I don't know. All right. On to Tagore. Tagore is Hinduism. For Tagore, the idea of what we do, what we want to be, is not. We want to become the eternal man. We want to reach the state where, just as the Hindu, just as the Muslim found meaning in following the Quran, the laws of God, and made sense of himself in the world, herself in the world, through the teaching of Muhammad. Tagore wants us to find meaning, fulfillment in becoming one with the eternal man, the man that transcends time and space, that has always been and always will be how human beings should be. He uses the word man, so I'm kind of stuck with it. I am assuming he's using the word man in the most generic term, Homo sapiens, rather than for the gender. I don't know for sure. I've never found him writing where he refers to women as women. So, or an ideal woman. I think he's just saying that the eternal person, the person that lasts forever, is our key to immortality. We cannot live forever as we are, but by coming most truly, most perfectly, as explicitly and completely as we can, identical with in character and behavior, the eternal man who lasts forever, then if we can follow to that person, then we give our life meaning, we give our life shape, and we, for all intents and purposes, live forever. Again, I have my own reservations about that, particularly this idea of I live forever when I don't exist. And to me, that's a problem. Living forever means living forever. And living is me, not some ideal state. But peace on that. That's Tagore's message to us. It's not very complicated. Again, he rattles on and around, talking about all kinds of things that seem like they might add up to something more, but they really don't. He says it quite concisely. Near the end. Page 435. What is evident in this world is the endless procession of moving things. But what is to be realized is the supreme human truth by which the human world is permeated. He goes on, we must never forget today that a mere movement is not valuable in itself, that it may be a sign of a dangerous form of inertia. And when he's talking about movement here, he's talking about a political movement or a social movement. He's writing, as I recall, at the time, 1931. So during the time that we have the Indian independence movement being born, real efforts to change the world in other parties, shall we mention Nazism and fascism in Italy and militarism in Japan, all kinds of things all over the world, to be fair. I mean, these are the ones that get tarred and feathered, and that's one of the reasons he wants to speak out. But, I mean, you do have other, perhaps more friendly sounding movements. See, the NAACP is around 20 years old at this point, but it's still at work. 31, there's still prohibition in United States, the movement to try to get people off drinking. So lots of little movements like that going on. And he wants us, that make it clear that sometimes a movement isn't really an attempt to move forward toward that perfect man, but rather an attempt to let's just all stay right here. This is perfectly fine. Why should we move? Really move. We must be reminded that the great upheaval of spirit, a universal realization of true dignity of man, once caused by Buddha's teaching in India. I said he's a Hindu, and he is a Hindu. But the Hindu tradition sees the Buddha as a reformer and emphasizes that he continues in their tradition, simply proposing another way through to it. And again, so unlike other traditions where the reformer is seen as a villain, this great upheaval started a movement for centuries, which produced illumination of literature, art, science, and numerous efforts of public beneficence. This was a moment whose motive force was not some additional accession of knowledge or power, or urging of some overwhelming passion. It was an inspiration for freedom, the freedom which enables us to realize Dharma, which is the law, which is the truth of the Gitas and the Vedas, the way which enables us to come to the eternal man. And that's what he says, come to the eternal man. So that's our goal. That is what it is to be, is to come in tune with this eternal person. And that's the way humans should try to live. That's how we perfect humans. Real quick, running over it again. How we were when we were with Mencius. He was perfecting humans by remembering that they are intrinsically good, that they will listen to their inner intrinsic goodness, follow the true teachings of the true sages. Then we will all have, so tradition and religious wisdom, we will all be good people. Al-Faruqi taught us that, again, we are essentially good, and that if we will submit our will to Allah, then we will be good, and we can find Allah's will through the teachings of Muhammad and the study of the Quran. Kant didn't so much think we were intrinsically good as that we were intrinsically perfectible, and that in being intrinsically perfectible, we were perfected through reason. That through reason we will continue to become a better and better species, and find a way through to peace and perfection. Heidegger, we have an innermost self, and we can perfect ourselves through projecting that innermost self through the various levels of self in the world to all of those levels. And then in that way we are authentic, we are true to ourselves, and that is fundamental to being the best possible us we can be. Tagore has brought us this idea that to get to perfection, we need to look at the eternal man, the man that lasts forever, the man, the Atman, that vision of perfection that was present at the creation by Brahma, and the preservation by Vishnu. Okay, that brings us to Lebra. I suppose that's the right name to accent there. Our authors are not very helpful. He makes the point that there are at least 3 overlapping layers of self, according to Japanese view of reality. He attempts in his outset to say that we have our unique view, a unique Japanese sense of self that hasn't been properly analyzed or taught. to the rest of the world. He talks about the interactional self, which is the awareness of self as defined, sustained, enhanced, or blemished through social interaction. So again, we have ourself as we are presented, we have ourself as we feel for others, and there is a third one there somewhere, but I don't see it. Let me look here. No, I'm sorry. They're polar. Presentational and empathetic. In other words, it's me trying to sell myself to you presentationally, me empathetically, me trying to find a way for us to link, us to coexist. Ideally, of course, you're doing the same back to me. It's a negotiation process that we try to feel each other out, not just simply press our point on the world, but that which is necessary. I mean, we have to, or we can't help but do it. But it's also that we want to negotiate and find a middle ground that we can come to each other. So that's the first level, this interactional self. Now we'll talk about what he calls the inner self. And this is the source of morality, the foundation of all other selves. When the inner self is where we deal with, let's take a quick look at that problem of the presentational self, putting myself out as product, so to speak, versus the empathic self, where we're working back and forth between each other. I'm trying to find a way to be to react to you, to meet your needs. There's no question that each can get in the way of the other. So the inner self, that house of that place of the true values, true self-image, true actuality, has to become the mediator. How far can I go toward surrendering my values or my positions in order to connect with you? And that negotiation needs that inner self as a way of expressing the truth, where we really want to be. So it cannot be. It can become dissociated from the outer self, but it should never be allowed to stay that way. I mean, that's when we are alienated from ourselves and we feel lost and confused and unhappy. And then we have the boundless self, and the boundless self is that transcendental self. It's a self that extends beyond our range, our limited existence, and that self is, he suggests, most truly Japanese self. It's the thing that they offer, maybe that the rest of the world doesn't. That's silly. We see, of course, there's the transcendental movement. This idea of going beyond ourselves into a greater reality is present in all of the cultures. I mean, that's been part of the message of this book, that you can find that transcendental self, that self beyond our limited ego in all of these cultures. I continue to have the same reservation, though, about that kind of talk. Can we talk about a self that isn't me? I mean, we can certainly talk about a mind that isn't my mind. That's no problem. We can talk about a body that isn't my body. There's no problem. But to talk about a self that isn't me seems to me the exact antithesis of what it is to be a self. I'm not trying to suggest that the mystical experience doesn't exist. I'm just suggesting that when we transcend ourselves, we are in fact leaving ourselves. And I understand the fearfulness of such a concept, and that's part of the reason why those persons who are fearful constantly want to draw back from saying, "Oh, my self disappears." I mean, they say that, but they say because I come one with the other self. When you become one with the other self, you aren't anymore. Your self doesn't exist anymore. It has to be that way. Otherwise, you aren't truly one. You know, when your food becomes one with you, you can't go through and find, oh, here's a piece of the food that I ate yesterday, here in this cell in my leg or in my hair. No, it can't be done. It's become one with you. It's inseparable. It has lost its identity. And surely, self and identity are tied somewhere. Okay. One last road through two of my favorite philosophers to try to offer, if you will, a counterpoint, a different melody than the constant harmonization that we've had so far. We're going to take a look at the work of William James and Friedrich Nietzsche. Thanks.